So welcome back to Susan's Craft Cabin and part 2 of the video showing you how to revamp and refurbish a very, very old lampshade, starting from scratch pretty much. The first thing I did was to bind the top of the frame and the bottom of the frame with binding tape. This allows us to sew our actual fabric onto the frame itself, and you can see instructions on how to do that in one of my previous tutorials. I've used a 1-inch binding tape and you can buy this on Amazon. So the next thing we've got to do using this beautiful fabric is to cut out a pattern, and we're going to use the old lampshade cover to make a pattern from. So it comes in 2 pieces, this particular one. So that's one side and the other, and I'm going to cut out 2 pieces of this outer fabric on the bias for the lampshade cover. I'm about to cut out the pattern pieces now. I've got to remember that I need to leave 1 inch at the top and 1 inch at the bottom, so that I've got enough fabric to be able to stitch it onto the frame. You don't make any allowance for this side seams at all, because you've cut it on the bias, the fabric will stretch and fit onto the frame. So you don't need any seam allowance on the side. So when you join the 2 pieces together, you only need 1/4 inch seam allowance on the sides. So top 1 inch, at the bottom 1 inch allowance, and no allowances when you cut the sides. Only when you sew the 2 pieces together, allow 1/4 inch for your sewing, and that will allow the fabric to fit firmly onto the frame. So I'll do that now. So, inch at the top. You can allow a bit more if you wish. And again, this side, cut right up against the edge on the side. And a good inch on the bottom, 1.5 inches, whatever you like, to give you enough fabric to be able to manipulate the fabric onto the frame when you come to fit it. So there's the first piece, and I'll do another piece, and then I'll do the same with the lining fabric. So I've got 4 pieces of fabric altogether, 2 of the outer, 2 of the lining. Then we'll stitch the 2 master pieces for the outside fabric on the machine down the side, allowing just about 1/4 inch down that side and the other side, and we'll do the same with the lining fabric. On the sewing machine, I have sewn the fabric 2 side seams together, only 1/4 inch away. I've sewn the right sides together of the outer fabric pattern that I've cut, only allowing a very narrow 1/4 inch side seam on both sides. That's all you need. And I'm going to trim that as closely as I can to the stitching line without compromising the stitches. I don't need to take very much off, just a little bit. And having done that, I'm going to turn it inside out and fit it over the frame. So there we have that. and we're going to now place it over the frame, making sure that your seam lines are directly over one of these struts, because you don't want to be seeing, when the shade is lit, you don't want to be seeing the seam line. So I've done one side. This is a very big frame, it's much more difficult on a big frame. So we'll pin it into place on either side, like so. This is why it's a good thing to have a good inch at the bottom, because you can pull it down. And we're going to pull the shade into position all the way round, pinning it in position. This can take a little bit of time, so I'm going to pin all the way around the top, and then we'll pull it into shape and pin around the bottom. I've pinned the fabric all the way around the top, and I've pulled it taut all the way around the bottom. I've still got some bits to do, making sure that everything is really taut, so that when it's all sewn up, when you pat it, it sounds like a drum. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to stitch with a running stitch. You can use a proper lampshade stitch if you wish. I just use a simple running stitch. I find it's just as effective, and it works very well on the hundreds of lampshades I've made. So now I'll just sew around the top with a double thread, and then I'll do the same with the bottom, and then your outer frame is complete. I've sewn all the way around the top of the shade and the bottom. This is a very large shade, so it has taken some time, but it's nice and taut. And now all I have to do is to trim the edges here at the top and the bottom, and you'll see it, how lovely and neat it is. It sounds lovely, nice and taut, and I'll trim the top and I'll trim the bottom, the little excess bit of fabric, and then on the next video I will show you how we're going to balloon line this lovely frame. So I hope you've enjoyed watching the video. I hope you found it useful. Please subscribe, and as I say, part 3 will be all about balloon lining this beautiful shade. Thank you for watching. Bye.